Welcome to the Frustrated by Your Marketing podcast, brought to you by Skyline Studio. I'm your host, Jim D'Amico.
And I'm your co-host, Madison McQuistion.
Our podcast will bring you the latest in marketing news and strategies for internal marketing teams, marketing specialists, and business owners.
So if you are frustrated by your marketing, then this is the podcast for you.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Frustrated by Your Marketing podcast. And I'm really excited about this one. We're going to talk about all things Yelp. We mentioned it a little bit in last week's episode, and I'm super excited because I'm not a huge fan of Yelp.
Yeah.
And I know a ton of people who like them even less. And so we're going to talk about why people hate Yelp so much, and how it plays a role in the market, and how it plays a big role in reviews, and in particular for restaurants, and what you could do about it, and again, why everybody hates them, and why they in particular think that, because it rubs pretty much everyone I've ever met the wrong way. So we'll go over that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been responding on Yelp quite a bit this week and last week, and I feel like I've learned a lot more about Yelp after doing some research for the podcast episode this week. So I know I'm going to learn a lot from you in this episode.
Yeah, I've worked with Yelp for a while, and they're, like I said, for our restaurant clients, they're a big bone of contention. So sort of how this episode came to be is I was researching stuff for last week's episode, which is review management and just reputation management in general. And I was out for dinner with Sky at a restaurant for one of our clients, and he came out and we were talking to him. He's the chef and owner. And I didn't even mention that we were doing something about reviews, but he brought up Yelp and sort of off the cuff spit out to me the definition of Yelp. So he doesn't like Yelp enough that he memorized the definition of Yelp, and I'll read it to you right now. So the definition of Yelp is a short, sharp cry, especially of pain and alarm. And so he had this memorized, and literally that's exactly what he said to me, and then went off on probably a 10-minute tirade about how much he hates them, and how they're the worst, and they're so bad for businesses. And
so is Yelp one of the platforms then that this client is struggling with the most compared to maybe Google and Facebook and TripAdvisor?
Yes. It's not that they're struggling with it. It's just frustrating the way that consumers use it. So reviews on Google and reviews on Facebook are fair reviews. So I'm not, by and large, the person doesn't see themselves as a freedom fighter of sorts. They're not looking to right wrongs. They're just looking to say they had a good experience or a bad experience. The reviews are shorter. They're on these other platforms. They're usually a half a point to a point higher. So they're usually more positive. And I think when businesses see Yelp reviews come in and there are these long paragraphs like we spoke about last week, and the person positions themselves as experts in a lot of cases, like a lot of Yelp reviews will start with, I've been in the restaurant industry for 20 years and I'm going to tell you how to run your kitchen. Or, I used to be a general manager. So there's this, the consumer that is leaving these reviews has this feeling that they're more powerful, and I think that puts it in a bad foot, right? So the restaurant, the person receiving the message was already in a bad mood about it, and again they're by and large more negative, and that's part of it too. And the other piece that really bothers restaurant owners is because there's this big community of Yelpers who consider themselves, amateur food critics. There's this big influx of reviewers at the beginning. So if a restaurant opens, there are dozens of Yelp reviews in the first couple of weeks, or more, and those then peter off. And I think it's these Yelpers, they are given different badges and statuses and things like that. So they need to go to the new restaurant, and they also think they know maybe more than they do. Maybe they do know stuff, but they have this chip on their shoulder. They come out right away when the restaurant's still in the weeds. They're still figuring stuff out, and there's more negative at that time. So
yeah, definitely.
When they're paying attention the most, and when they need that really good community support at the beginning, Yelp doesn't provide it. There's no red carpet from Yelp. Yelp gives you the complete opposite. It gives you sort of the cold shoulder
Well, I saw that Yelp honestly like cares more about the customers and the consumers anyways than businesses.
Absolutely. And I didn't even know that until I started researching this. I probably knew it, but never really took the time to think about it. And I listened to, so in prep for the last week's podcast, which now has become this week's podcast, I listened to a bunch of podcasts just about Yelp. And one of them was, it was the How I Built This podcast with Guy Raz.
That's the one I listened to. Yep.
Oh, you listened to that. It was great.
Yeah.
Super interesting. In fact, I'll probably listen to other episodes of that podcast. You know, he works with entrepreneurs and business owners and people who launch new stuff. So he did an interview with the Yelp CEO and one of the co-founders, Jeremy Stoppelman. And it was a super, super interesting podcast. And he sounds like a really nice guy, the guy who created it. And the story is super interesting, you know, bootstrapping it through, you know, a tech period where there wasn't a lot of startups, and he knew Elon Musk and he leveraged his contacts and the struggles and all that stuff. But the interesting thing about that interview is he never, during the whole hour-long interview, he never really talked about the businesses except one point where he said, yeah, business owners don't really like us. They get mad about the way we do reviews. And, you know, what a sad thing to say about a platform that really is there to serve businesses and help businesses and makes their money off of businesses. You know, the consumer doesn't pay Yelp.
Yeah.
It's the businesses that do it. And I'm not saying that means you should make it unfair, but their unfairness is so heavily weighted against businesses, we'll go into that in a second, that it's just, you know, basically puts them at that, you know, that bone of contention with their main customer.
Yeah.
So their main customer, the people that keep them in business, don't like them because of how they've set up to run their platform, and it's too bad. And so, like I said, super interesting interview. Seemed like a really nice guy. You know, obviously very successful, but I think he missed the mark on that. And I don't know if there's any going back now. I think, you know, they're set up with, you know, they will never be friendly to businesses. Certainly never friendly to restaurants.
I was going to say, and don't businesses have to pay quite a bit to use the platform too? I think I saw that Yelp doesn't show the best photos that customers post of a business's food unless the business pays for the top photos to be highlighted on their profiles.
So this is one of those tricks. So if you don't everything's a premium listing or a premium upcharge, which is fine, you know, but in my mind, the way premium listings work on Google is either show up or you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're paid for a Google ad, I mean, you know, things cost money. You know, I don't think anybody's questioning that. If you pay for an ad, you get better exposure. But the way Yelp has chosen to do this, in addition to not getting good exposure if you don't pay them, they make your profile look worse. So your patrons come and they shoot a blurry, dark photo of the dessert half eaten, and they put that up there, and that might show before your beautiful photos that you took of that same dessert by a professional photographer and spent all that time, and you don't get to choose what shows up first. And it's very clear if you look at profiles that are not sponsored that they almost go out of their way not to show the photos that you've posted unless you pay, and then you get to pick the ones that show up first. I mean, they're all there. Again, but it's just kind of how they've done it. And it forces you, if you want your profile to look good, you want people to, you know, they've clicked in, they're ready to go to your restaurant, they look at these garbage photos, they may be less likely to come. Same thing with reviews. You get to highlight your better reviews if you pay. Otherwise, you know, you might have a 4.2 rating, and that's great. But if you pay, your 5-star reviews show up first and people start reading. If you don't pay, your 1-star reviews show up first. So,
which is crazy because I saw 45% of customers will look at a business's reviews within the first 24 hours of visiting the business. So the fact that, you know, you have to pay for your good reviews to show up is just crazy. But
it's sad. It really is. And so, and it's, you know, I'll use this word, which I'm going to steal a little bit here, but it is very predatory. And so the other podcast that I listened to, well, I guess there was a third one too, but the other main podcast I listened to was the John Taffer podcast. So he's the bar rescue guy, and he went on a complete tirade. I mean, it was an hour of screaming and yelling, and he also called Yelp predatory to his industry. I mean, he's really in that industry. And he interviewed a ton of different restaurants and bar owners and things, during that interview, and none of them had anything good to say. And they went into, how they, sort of block the good if you don't pay them. And he also went into how aggressive they are in their marketing. And that's the other piece. So I'd say the one positive thing about Yelp is they've run their sales department better than anybody I've ever seen. I am nervous to even respond to them, because if you give them an inch, they'll literally hound you even more than they already are. So we're on some kind of cycle for every client that we manage, because we don't pay. That's one of the things I don't believe in paying for Yelp, because again, I have this negative feeling about them. But it must be like a 3-month cycle, and they'll follow up anywhere from 5 to 10 times, 5 phone calls and 5 emails every quarter or so. And if you do anything on the profile, like change anything or update anything, they'll hit you up again, because they're like, oh, this is a live lead, they're interested, and they are aggressive. And I made the mistake one time of answering the phone and talking to a Yelp person, and I explained to them that, so a step back from that, we actually, I don't know how many years ago this was, let's say 7 years ago, we did, no, it could have been that 6-7 years, it must have been 5 years ago, we tested it for Skyline. I was like, I got someone on the phone, again, they're aggressive, and I was like, okay, we'll test it, we'll see, I don't think it'll work for websites and marketing, but let's try it. And I did it for 3 months or 2 months, and it failed miserably.
Nah.
It's just, no one goes on Yelp for that. People go on Yelp for entertainment
that's true.
stuff.
It's primarily used for restaurants. Yeah.
Right. They really want other industries to be part of it, but I don't ever see that happening. There's enough bad press about it for the industries that they have a stranglehold on, that they're not going to get these other industries. So anyways, I did that test, didn't work. And then I made the mistake of talking to somebody a year or so later, and I explained that. I was like, it didn't work. He's like, no, I'll give you X number off and whatever. I'm sure it'll work. I guarantee it. And I had what probably was like half an hour conversation where I said, if you guarantee it, then, I'll happily pay for it, but do it for free first. And it was this circular conversation where he would not let me off the phone until I admitted it worked, even though it didn't. And, so they're that aggressive in their sales technique. That they will hound you, yell at you. I mean, it was not a kind conversation. And, but if you happen to be looking for someone for your sales team and you want them to be aggressive, I would poach previous Yelp salespeople, because they're awesome. At least in that respect, because I know that they're selling other people. They just aren't selling us. And we now, after that mistake, I don't answer the phone. And then you feel guilt. I hate ignoring people, but I will ignore 5 phone calls and 10 emails, with nothing. I won't respond, even not interested, because they'll take that too. They're really, really aggressive, and they want you to pay them to make your listing look halfway decent, and it's not worth it. So those are the two main podcasts I listen to. And then it sort of in my sort of research, there's not a ton of podcasts about Yelp. I think will be one of the.
I noticed that too when I was looking it up. Yeah, it was kind of hard to. So I just took the ones that were on your list and was listening to those ones. So, but
there's a great one. If you want to just get a little bit of a chuckle, it's called Beach Too Sandy, Water Too Wet. They do dramatic readings of Yelp reviews. So it's a brother and sister. They go through. The one I listened to was about buffets, and it's just they go in these people's reviews about buffets.
Okay, and that's awesome, because whenever I'm responding to Yelp reviews, there are some that are definitely so dramatic that I just sit there laughing, because they're so terrible. They're like so detailed. Yeah, that's hilarious. I'll definitely have to listen to that.
Yeah, check it out. Sure. So, and they've got I think over 100 episodes or something like that. They've been doing it for a while, and they're all categorized by different industries and stuff. And it's great. So those are the 3 podcasts I found as I was doing this. I think that the real thing about Yelp and the reason they got themselves into this is what they care about and their mission and how they were founded. So in that episode where I listened to the co-founder talk about it, he talked about where it started. So Yelp started as an idea where you would request, this part failed, where you would request from your friends and family feedback about something. So you would say, I'm going to go to this water park, whatever it is, what's it like? And you'd send out an email or some sort of message on the app or I guess it was a website. They weren't an app first because they were before apps. But you send out some kind of email or some kind of message. It would go to your friends and family and they could respond back and say, oh, I went, it was great. And
that's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Right. So that part failed miserably. And it was sort of an afterthought that you would publicly post a review. And again, so they started with this concept of helping consumers get their questions answered. And that's where they're coming from. And again, I don't think that they should be ignoring the consumers either. Mm-hmm. But because they did that, they're ignoring the business owners who are providing the substance for what's going on. And a couple other things they do that really affect the business owners is they are aggressively against asking for reviews. And I get that, that's not necessarily always a good, I get why they their mission maybe is well-founded, that they want, more accurate reviews. But if you take that away completely, you certainly punish smaller businesses. So, sure. A big, multi, state chain restaurant, they're going to get hundreds of reviews, but the little mom and pop diner is not. And people post reviews when they're angry. And so if they don't get to ask their best customers for reviews, they're going to, again, their Yelp review is going to be a point less than their Google review. And so if there's any connect, I've gotten Yelp reviews removed, and they don't actually remove them. They just hide them in this section that's very, very, it's like super small print.
Yeah.
Just the reviews not recommended. It's very hard to find, even though I know where to look for it. I miss it every time, and they just put them under there, and you'll see in there, it's almost always a person who's only left 1 or 2 reviews. So again, they're now new to the platform. So Yelp is also missing an opportunity to get that person engaged. And it's there are a ton of positives in there. So those are ones that the person had a great experience, and the waitress says, hey, please leave us a review on Yelp, or leave us a review. And the person goes to Yelp and they do it, and they start their platform, and that's where they get hidden. And so the fact that Yelp does that is, again, it's hard for the restaurateur to get, it's hard to get a review. And if you're not asking for them, like, how are you going to get them?
Yeah.
Again, people usually like to talk about when something bad happens. So if you don't get to help yourself by encouraging the people that are having a good experience, it's against for you. So that, again, that's one of the things that's really bad about it. And then another interesting thing I found out, so Google tried to buy Yelp at some point in the process. I think it was like 2012. Yelp said no. And then Google went on to create Google reviews after that. And, I have no problem with Google reviews. They're fair. They're listed chronologically. They don't hide anything. I've seen where reviews don't get put in every once in a while, where it's like a clear problem. I had an example where I was helping a client with something, and I was literally in her office helping her, and I mentioned, like, hey, I'd love a review, and she logged in to leave the review, but she was under her daughter's account, signed in on Google, and so she left the review twice, and then it got removed completely, and there was no way for her to get it back. Because that looks super fishy to leave the same review from the same IP address, from 2 different email addresses within 5 minutes of each other. That's the type of stuff where people leave fake reviews, and so that comes down. But with the weird exception of weird stuff like that, everything gets up there. You could get them removed if they're bad. Like, it's really hard to get a Yelp review removed. And sometimes they need to be removed because they're hostile, or they're aggressive, or they're completely fake, or they're from an ex-employee. So they're a little bit more helpful with that. And by and large, because of that, and they'll allow you, to ask for reviews. Where Yelp they make it very hard for you to even send people to that review page, where Google has a nice little link you can send to somebody. So it's just a better experience. So anyways, it's probably good for us that they didn't get to buy Yelp, because maybe they wouldn't be so good either.
That's crazy. Yeah. One of the things I've actually been recently noticing a lot is people, if you have one angry customer, I have seen them one person posting on all 4 platforms. So like with our software, Bright Local, we can see all of the reviews that come in one spot. And I'll like read through them and I'm like, oh, these 4 are the same. And then I'll realize that the person who has the profile posted the same review in 4 different spots. So like Facebook, Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor. And sometimes those are so hard to respond to, but most of the time, like, well, we responded to your review on this platform, but here's the gist of what we said on that one. And I've been noticing that so much lately with people who are angry about random reasons.
And that's what reviewing has become, and much more so on Yelp, is it's a airing of grievances. And so people, they want to be heard. They expect, I don't know where people started expecting perfection from the services they get. You should expect really good, but we're still in the post-COVID world. Restaurants have a really hard time staffing.
And people are responding more now too, or at least posting reviews now more after COVID too.
Right.
I think
so
like responding has gone up by like 25 to 50%, some crazy number.
Yeah. And I think it's somehow during COVID, we started expecting things to be more perfect. I don't know, maybe because things were so bad, but we're still digging out of it. And costs are up and labor is hard to find. And, staff is, some of it's new. There might have been a restaurant that had the same chef for a decade, and now they're dealing with, their 3rd chef in the last 3 years. It's harder to do those things, and the customer's, less forgiving, and it's just causing this horrible situation where restaurants are suffering because of it, and it's too bad. And Yelp is really the culprit. And yeah, so I'm not a fan. So another interesting Yelp tidbit is this was literally right before COVID. There's a brewery in Connecticut, and they so this is, I would call, review spamming, and this is something else to watch out for. It's sort of I saw this, it was mostly on Yelp, so that's why I'll bring it up here, but it could certainly happen on any platforms. And they were also spamming their Google a little bit too. But they attacked a political party member somewhere, and the other political party, or their political party followers, or whatever it was, I can't remember the specifics. They started spamming this brewery with 1-star reviews, and it was like 1 a minute for hours until Yelp finally took the whole page down. So, again, this is all about customer service, treating your customers well, and how you present yourself anywhere. In the case of reviews, this is something that could happen. People can leave a review not just because of the experience, but because of a side experience. So how you are on social media, how you treat the guest. If you see them on the street, people are looking for a reason to leave negative reviews. And so protect yourself by being kind and not poking the bear, because especially on Yelp, that's what they want to respond that way.
Well, and the other thing I noticed too when I was doing my research is that businesses, at least with Yelp, are starting to sue customers now more that keep leaving repetitive bad reviews, which is crazy to me. And a lot of them, at least, I think the article I read, it gave like 5 different cases, and most businesses had won the cases in court, which is crazy, because I saw one that was a couple had gone and ended up getting sued like $25,000 from a business, held up in court. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I mean, it's defamation, and if it's not real, and or it's pettiness. So if their food was cold and they exaggerate that to something that is more hostile, then shame on them. And if it's just cold, they can probably have just spoken to the general manager and gotten something warm. Got that heated up or recooked. So I think they should be sued, especially if it's hurting businesses, which it is. It's libel, right? You're not allowed to attack somebody falsely. So
I was going to say I've seen quite a few reviews too with our clients that's like someone will respond and write a review saying, oh, my friend went here last week and they told me this is what happened, but I've never been there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah. So those are good examples of reviews that could be taken
yeah,
down
if you
because
haven't
it's
been
hearsay.
there, why are you writing a review? It wasn't your experience.
Right. Yeah, that's terrible. Okay, so I think I covered all the... Oh, this is another interesting stat. So Yelp, again, is lower on average from what I've read and just seen with our clients, a half a point to a point lower than Google. And a stat on revlocal.com is that for every increase in star rating, you can increase your revenue from 5 to 9%. So
Thanks.
these matter. Like, it really matters for business. So what does this all mean? It means respond to your reviews no matter what. So people know that there's a person behind it that cares, because they might be a little less likely to leave that bad review, even if they are unhinged.
And from what we learned from the last podcast episode, if you guys haven't listened to that one, is respond within a week to bad reviews and any reviews for the most part.
Right. Respond within a week. Ask for reviews, except maybe not for Yelp, but maybe ask them if they've got an active Yelp profile. Be kind to your guests as well. That's always just a good thing. I mean, this doesn't mean that every bad review is wrong. There are things everybody always needs to improve, but yeah, work on getting those improved, because it matters. It matters for your revenue. For sure.
Yeah, but a lot of them take them as advice. Make your business better.
Right. Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Oh, one other little... Okay, so one last thing on Yelp, and then we'll move into our unsolicited marketing feedback segment. So, like we said, Yelp is very pro-consumer. So when I say everybody hates Yelp, I'll say with the exception of Yelp Elites. So I do know some Yelp Elites in Connecticut, and they're a super fun group. They're great people. I have no problem with them. And they are, it's a sort of food blogger community, at least the ones that I know. And they get together, they have events, and they go to parties, and they review the parties, and they're at the openings, and they have a great time. And they're by and large very positive in reviews and in the way that they treat people. So there are, good people there. There is a good community there. So I think that's a good way to leave this. It's not all bad. There are some really good players there who, they've found a niche where they can share, and they can have this group of people who care about restaurants and care about good food and that community. So it's more the corporate structure. So I would say that some of the reviewers, especially these Yelp Elites, seem to care. Now, the Yelp complainers, not so much, and the corporate structure, definitely not so much. So I think that's my take on Yelp. I'm not a fan, and I think you should not pay them for your advertising ever.
I completely agree.
That's my advice. Spend it on Google or somewhere else. Okay, So unsolicited marketing feedback. This one is a positive one. There's no surprise here. We already went over it, but I'm going to show you a logo redesign. This a couple weeks ago, but I thought this was super interesting, and it leads into something that I wanted to talk about in a future episode, which is a direction I see graphic design, or just design in general, going. So Pepsi has a new logo. This was their previous logo, and this is their new logo. I don't know if it's actually on the shelves now, and I've read about this, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so I'd love Madison's feedback on the logo, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it.
It's hard because I'm not a Pepsi drinker. I mean, obviously, I've, at least in recent years, associated the Pepsi logo with
I'm also
the last current
Pepsi
one.
drinker. I'm a Coke drinker. But
wait, one on your desk.
Yeah. That wasn't planned either, but yes, I always have a Coke on my desk.
Yeah, the one before the recent change, so the one with the blue background. I mean, that's kind of what I associate Pepsi with, but I don't think the new one is bad whatsoever, because I think you said that one was last used in 1991? So this is interesting. So this is the previous one, and there's been a bunch of derivations similar to this, and this is the new one as of soon or now. This is the history of the Pepsi logo through time. And interestingly enough, they did a consumer study where they interviewed a bunch of their fans, and they had them like freehand draw Pepsi logos.
And pretty much everybody drew this logo, which ended being used back in 1991. And I bet if you had asked me prior to this, I would have done that too. Like all of these other, like these never caught on. It never really engaged people the same way. So they went back to what worked. I think that's really, really smart. And I like it.
Which, for those of you, if you're listening to the audio version of this, the newest logo is the one with Pepsi in the circle.
Correct. Oh yeah, we should
not side by side with the logo.
Yes. So this is on YouTube as well, and you can see what we're showing right now. So we got to remember to do that. Okay. So anyway, I think it's smart. It's, you know, a slightly different version of what they had back before 1991, which was a very similar version they had since 1962. So that just sort of evolved from 1962 to 1991, and then they just played around with it like crazy from 1991 until 2023.
Yeah.
And it just became this big mess, and now they're going back to what worked. So I think my feedback is I think that's really smart. It's what people remember for the brand. I think it's cleaner. It's cohesive. It kind of is contained. You know, some of these, they're all over the place. So I really like it. Yeah. And the other thing I think that's super interesting is this piece right here. And this is something, you know, and the logo itself might not match exactly what I'm about to say, but certainly the branding between the today and tomorrow does, which is I feel like there's a trend going towards darker design aesthetic. So
yeah, for sure.
Prior to this, bright white screens, light, airy, negative space. That was all the rage. I'm seeing more and more companies look for dark. And I think a lot of it has to do with your generation, Gen Z. They love dark mode on their phone. They don't remember when computers were, you know, a black screen with green letters on it. And I think, you know, my generation, like we wanted light and airy because computers couldn't do that when we first started using them. So that was new and trendy and modern. And for you, it's about, you know, protecting your eyes, and you've been using computers since you were born. And so dark mode's going to take over. So I definitely want to do an episode on that, but I feel like that's part of what's going on here. I mean, you could see the Pepsi here. If that's not black, it's very, very dark blue.
Yeah. Yep.
And certainly they chose to put it on a black background. So, you know, I think that is at least partially goes along that trend. And I like it. So I would give this a thumbs up. I think it's a good redesign.
I think so too. I mean, especially for a brand like Pepsi. I mean, everybody knows the brand Pepsi, so it works for them if they're wanting to kind of change their logo because everybody kind of knows them already. Whereas if it was like a newer brand, switching your logo that drastically can sometimes not be as great. But I really like it. I mean, if they've used it in the past, people already know it. So
right, and you know, again, it's always a bad idea unless you were literally changing your company completely to completely rebrand. So they kept the same red, white, blue. It's still in a circle. They happened, you know, they moved the text back into the center, but it's a continuation of that same, you know, if you look back at that, I'll pull up that screen again. If you look back at that evolution, you know, except for Brad's drink, which I guess was Pepsi before, which I didn't know, you know, everything sort of everything's a continuation of the next. So this text got dropped on the bottle cap got changed, then the bottle cap became the swoosh, and then here we're sort of evolving back, but you know, this little bottle cap here has continued in some way back from 1951, and I think that's good. If you look at it, most good rebrands, you know, some aspects stay the same. You know, they made one, you know, some changes each level. So it was just red. They brought in the blue. The blue has remained since. You know, they're changing the tone of the blue. They're changing the swooshes and making them look a little different. This is when the things were in 3D, but it did go, you know, they didn't all of a sudden use green as their logo. So I think that's a smart way to do it. Okay. So anyways, that's our marketing feedback. I think that's our episode. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. Great episode.
We'll try to remember to say.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it's fun to talk about Yelp because, like you said, I mean, there's not a whole lot of podcast episodes on it. Yelp can be frustrating, and you know, it's always nice to hear advice on how to handle reviews, especially with different platforms because some of them are so different.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do future episodes on Google reviews or some of the other platforms. They certainly won't be as negative as this one, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for joining us. See you next week. We don't know what the episode will be yet, but
no, it's gonna be a surprise. So you guys are gonna have to come back and listen to it.
Yeah. So subscribe wherever you can, and or watch on YouTube so you can see what we were sharing. And we will see you next week.
Yeah, see you guys next week.